Hello, Happy New Year. Welcome to the program, the very first edition for the year 2025. And I am Imoni Amarire. Right, the year 2024 was arguably a tumultuous year around the world. For many people across the world, it was indeed a year that was. Nigeria as a country witnessed a strenuous socio-economic condition, from a galloping inflation that affected food prices and cost of consumer goods to a worsening security situation. It was without doubt a year to remember for many Nigerians. The political sphere had its share of challenges, with fractured political parties, electoral disputations, and, of course, bickerings amongst the political class. Towards the end of the year, tax reform bills generated a huge controversy as several key players either threw their support for or against the passage of the bills, with some riding on ethnic, religious, and regional considerations. The proposed 2025 federal budget and its set parameters have done little to allay the concerns and fears about the nation's unstable economic situation, corruption, and what some analysts predict could be a major crisis leading to a meltdown. Crime and criminality in the form of kidnappings, banditry, fraud, and, of course, there were other forms of criminalities around the country were rife in 2024, possibly as a result of the worsening economic and social conditions. Some analysts are persuaded to look to 2025 as a year of a clean break from the past, a time for a new start towards a positive future. Some others see it as a year bound to repeat the same old mistakes and failures that dominated the headlines in 2024. Will 2025 be the year of course correcting and getting the country back on track? Or will it be the same old story? Can the economy rebound on the premise of the several initiated reforms by the government? Will there be better governance, and will security improve? Will hope be enough as the administration approaches the halfway mark? These are issues that we look at today on the program as we look at expectations for 2025. Welcome to the program. I'm joined in the studio by two very eminent gentlemen who will be taking a look at these issues as we begin to unravel them. Professor Uche Uwaleke. Professor Uwaleke is a professor of capital market at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. He's also the president, Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Imani.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Welcome.
I'm delighted to be on your show.
We're also joined by Dr. Adoye Matthew Omale. He is a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year, Nigeria.
Happy New Year. All right, so let's go on a very short break. When we return, we'll be diving deep into the issues that dominated 2024 and as we look forward to the year 2025. Stay with us.
Nigeria of our dream. The Nigeria we need is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria, which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Professor Uche Uwaleke and Dr. Adoye Matthew Omale are here with me on the program. The very first for the year, Prof.
Thank you.
Right, so let's do a quick reflection on what it was like in 2024 from the economic perspective.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, there's no denying the fact. It's not, nobody's contesting that fact that 2024 was a very difficult year for um, Nigerians, many Nigerians, for that matter. And why I say nobody's contesting that, even the president admitted, to this fact in his New Year message, to Nigerians, where he also talked about 2024 as a year that was characterized by a lot of challenges. A number of Nigerians faced a lot of challenges in 2024. The numbers, of course, speak to that. Inflation was around 29% in January 2024, 29, yes. And the latest we have from National Bureau of Statistics as of November, inflation had gone up as high as 34.6%. And that's even talking about the average, what we say, the CPI, that's the average. If you disaggregate that figure and you possibly focus on food, the food component is very elevated at 40%. And in some parts of Nigeria, in Sokoto, for example, food inflation was reported at 52%. Okay, so when you have that kind of situation in which inflation rate is very high, particularly food inflation, you can also imagine the effect it has on poverty levels. And then, of course, you also have a situation in which the interest rate environment was very high. In February of 2024, you recall, the central bank raised the monetary policy rate by as much as 400 basis points. The following month, they got it up again by 200 basis points. And cumulatively, between February and November, the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee has raised the interest rates, the policy interest rate, by as much as 875 basis points. So when you have that kind of situation, of course, access to credit will be very limited. So a number of businesses, particularly small businesses, were adversely affected. And to a point where, today, capacity utilization in, business in Nigeria, has gone down. And you also find businesses having accumulated inventory of, we are told, as much as 1.2 billion naira. So all this was as a result of, some of the, headwinds we saw in 2024. And it's not just about the inflation, not just about the interest rate environment. There is also the exchange rate, to grapple with. Exchange rate in January was around 1,350 naira to the dollar. Okay, but it closed the year at 1,535. So you can see the volatility too in the exchange rate didn't help matters. Okay, of course, that affected the level of imports. Part of why we recorded even the trade surpluses, because imports declined, because of the high exchange rate environment. So the high exchange rate environment, the high interest rate environment, and also the high inflation rate we saw in 2024 all combined to, if you like, exert a lot of negative influence on the standard of living of Nigerians generally. So generally, it was a very, difficult year. Although, of course, we saw towards the end of 2024, we saw some, some improvements, notably with respect to GDP growth. GDP growth, we saw consecutive increase in GDP. First quarter, 2.98%, second quarter, 3.19%, and then third quarter, 3.46%. We also, I just mentioned the issue of the trade surplus that we, that we had. These are some of the positives we saw in 2024, but they were not enough, to impact positively or reasonably, on the lives of, Nigerians.
It's a good thing that you have mentioned most of these issues which were also touched on by the president in his New Year message.
Yes.
And we will come back to all of that very shortly. But Dr. Mali, from a social scientist point of view, I'd like you to reflect on the socio-political environment in 2024 as we move into 2025. Because in 2025, we'll be approaching the midway mark for this administration. And you know, as is customary in Nigeria, that by the time we get to the halfway mark, politics of the next election kicks in. And how that is likely going to impact the social, political, and even the economic environment in 2025.
Yeah, thank you very much. The frenzy has already started. 2027 politics has already commenced in many of the places. If you look at across the country during this festive period, National Assembly members, governors, everybody, they are trying to send palliatives and other things to people to warm their way into the hearts of the people. So yes, but 2025, as we approach the middle mark, there will be a lot of alignment, political realignment, and realignment. And above all, the government also will try as much as possible to try to address some of the issues that Professor Waleke has raised. Issue of inflation, issue of the devaluation of the currency, and several other issues that Nigerians have complained about. There's no doubt that 2024, I agree with Professor Waleke, has been very, very volatile for the entire country. And just like he said, towards the end, a lot of issues. But to me, the major causal factor of what we went through in 2024 was the removal of fuel subsidy, which was expected. Before the advent of the current government, petrol was selling about 130, 150 thereabouts. And then all of a sudden, we were buying petrol for 1,200, 1,000. And so that caused a lot of distortion in the economy. Analysts or economists have predicted, and that was why successive government has been very, very careful in wholesale removal of fuel subsidy, because it has a multiplier effect on all aspects of the economy, from transportation to haulage to every other aspect, down to the rural area, especially in a country where power is a problem. People have to use generators and fuel them and so on. So it was expected. However, a successive government has been very, very reluctant and afraid of removing this subsidy. And the current president came in and did it, and that is what the result is what we experienced in 2024. My joy is that a lot is being done. Just like Professor Waleke said, there's a general consensus that what happened in 2024 to Nigerian citizens, we don't pray that it will continue in 2025. And that is why if you look at the budget that was presented this time around, a lot of line items were put into the budget to try as much as possible to readdress the various issues. If you also look at with the coming on stream of some of the refineries that has been moribund for years, in which billions of naira has been spent on turnaround maintenance. As of today, as I was coming to the studio here, at the NNPC filling station, I bought 980 naira. It's a very good positive sign that 2025 things will get better. Only recently I heard about Warri Refinery has come on stream. So that has been my argument for some time, that even if subsidy is going to be removed, we have to stop the wholesale importation of petroleum products so that we can have enough supply domestically. That will have a lot of impact on the system. But I agree totally with Professor Waleke that a lot of work needs to be done in the area of poverty reduction. Despite most of the interventionist programs that we have looked at all over the years, something seems to be wrong with the execution of most of these programs. The beneficiaries are not always benefiting from what the social interventionist program, and that is a very serious problem. Another thing that struck me, Imoni, is the issue of the local government autonomy. That, to my mind, if it is implemented to the letter, will revolutionize the poverty level, addressing poverty issues at the grassroots. I was shocked when I saw the allocation to local governments. Some got in 2 billion, 3 billion. Those were the allocation that states used to get. And I think it became possible with the quantum of money that is being saved from the fuel subsidy removal. For a local government to have close to 2 billion, that is very instructive. A lot of poverty issues at the grassroots can be resolved. Infrastructure, empowerment programs for women and youth, and so on. So everything has to be done. During the Christmas visit by the governors, I saw the president talking about synergy with state governors. Please, local governments should be autonomous. They should run their budgets. They should be able to implement their programs so that we can all address this issue of poverty. So I agree with Professor Waleke that 2024 was turbulent, but I think the government and every other stakeholders, all of us Nigerians, we should do a lot to improve on what happened in 2024 so that, as you said during the prologue, so that our economic recovery, our economic development, our economic transformation can begin to take proper root from 2025. When it comes to the issue of economics, we should not play politics with it. In other climes, when it comes to economic issues, people take very serious interest in it, and partisanship is kept at bay so that everybody, because when you go to the market, there's no APC, PDP, or Labour Party or anything in the marketplace. So all the stakeholders in governance and those that are in the political sector should understand that we should not play politics with economic issues. On the issue of tax that you raised during the prologue and Professor Waleke talked about, definitely we need to reform our tax system.
We'll come back to that, Dr. Adoye, very well, because Prof, he just talked about the budget. Naturally, the budget of any country or the budget of any government is a policy statement, it's a projection of what plans a government has for the coming year. The 2025 budget is before the National Assembly. Yes. Now, very quickly, what does the appropriation bill as been presented? Of course, it will go through a lot of consideration and panel beating, as the case may be. But the bill as it is today, what does it tell us to expect in 2025? Will it bring about the much desired reform and rebound of the economy in 2025? Or are we hoping for too much?
Okay, well, if the targets, if we go by the targets in that budget, when I say targets, I'm referring to targets like inflation rate, for example. The 2025 budget is targeting inflation rate of 15% from where it is today. If we're able to bring down inflation rate exactly to 15%, of course, that's
more than half.
Oh yes, and yes, people have said is not attainable, but I have a different opinion. Yes, it may look ambitious, but I think it is possible for us to get to that 15% target. And I think listening to the president too during the media chat that I had, he was talking about when he was asked this particular question. Okay, he said he was going to approach it from the point of view of output, increasing output, which to me is the right way to go. Because part of why inflation rate is, very high today, part of why it is elevated today is because of the food issue, which I mentioned. The pressure is actually on food. So if we're able to ramp up food production, okay, the agri sector in particular, that will go a long way in bringing down the inflation rate. And once people are able to access, food, once people can go to the market and buy food at cheaper, prices, okay, of course, to a large extent, it will rub off positively on their well-being. So I think using that as a guide, okay, 2025 for me, I want to share in the optimism of those who think or who say that 2025 will be a lot better than what we experienced in 2024. Yes, I had said 2025 was a difficult year, but I also mentioned that we are also beginning to see some signs that will tell us that 2025 will be better. One of which is what he mentioned. For the first time, we are having a Christmas, a festive period without fuel queues, without fuel scarcity. Okay, and we're also beginning to see some moderation in even the pump price of fuel. Thanks to the competition that's coming in, Dangote refinery is there, and again, fortunately, the Port Harcourt refinery, is also up and running. And from what we hear, Warri refinery will soon join. So, if we have all that, and we also have many players in that sector as being planned in 2025, I'm pretty sure the pump price of fuel, will eventually come down. And also talking about exchange rates, again, part of the sign I said we're also beginning to see. Yes, exchange rate, went up in 2024, but I also think I don't share the view of people who say it will go more than 2,000 in 2025. And that's because of the fact that, if you notice, for some time we've seen some stability, at least in the official market, stability in the exchange rate, and the central bank too has been able, over the last few months, to grow reserves, foreign reserves. Foreign reserves today is in excess of $40 billion. In January 2024, foreign reserves was around 33 billion. Today it is over 40 billion.
42 or so.
Yes, 40.2 or so, which we here can finance over nine months of imports. So when you have that kind of reserves, I'm not too sure the central bank will sit back and watch the exchange rate, continue to go up. So one way or the other, the central bank will want to defend at least the naira using the arsenal, what it has at its disposal. So I think with the level of quantum of external reserves that we have, central bank will be in a position to manage the exchange rate. And of course, given the measures that it has also introduced, which has helped to increase remittances, and also increase foreign portfolio, investments. So I think with increase in foreign portfolio investments, increase in remittances, and the level of reserves that we'll have, central bank should be able to manage an exchange rate. And even the speculative aspect that we'll find in the market today is beginning to also come down. Recently, the central bank introduced an electronic matching system. Some of the transparency measures central bank has introduced, we also go a long way to check some sharp practices in that market. And once that is checked, it will also affect the exchange rate positively. So I want to believe that the naira will strengthen in 2025, which is why, remember, the budget, 2025 budget is using 1,500. Okay, even if we don't exactly get that, but I know it will stabilize, largely in 2025. Inflation rates, in my view, will also come down in 2025, going by some of the things the government, is doing, especially in the agri space. For example, listening to the media chat, the president talked about the effort to get in 2,000 tractors, from Brazil. That will also help in mechanized agriculture. So once we have that in place and output is increased, you should expect that, inflation rates will moderate.
For a country
so,
as big as Nigeria, 2,000 tractors.
No, but that's yes, at least is something. The important thing is that it has been recognized that we need to mechanize agriculture. It's also recognized that states too should be part of it. He has also said state governors are the ones that control the land. They own the land, by the constitution. So with the FG cooperating with the states, okay, especially in the area of food security, I'm pretty sure these things will be taken care of. And again, the issue you also mentioned, local government autonomy, is also very critical. I hear that very soon the local governments will now start getting their allocations directly. Okay, so that will go a long way to also draw development to the local government levels. And that also has its own impact, positive impact on even security. Because part of why we are also having high insecurity today in the country. You have kidnapping and so on. It's because nothing is happening at local government levels. So once the youths, okay, in the local governments are engaged, you reduce rural-urban migration, okay, because they see that there are activities in local governments, and the youths are engaged. And some of them will also not be thinking of, engaging in kidnapping and so on. So I think it will go a long way to improve even the security situation. And once the security situation improves, you can be sure that, even the output we are talking about, because part of why food is not available is also because, farmers are not unable to go to farms. So I think all of that will contribute to improve the environment we will have in 2025. And more importantly to me too is the issue, talking about the science, which is also why I want to make a case for it, the issue of these tax reforms. Okay, he mentioned it. Tax reforms, in my view too, are very, very necessary. Okay, even to start with. Right now, we are operating laws that some of them as far back as 1961. The Income Tax Management ITMA is as far back as 1961. We have old tax laws that need to be, reformed, and that is what has been packaged. And if you go through the bills, many of the people in your introductory remarks, you said people, are riding on ethnic, religious, and that is true. And that is because they have not, they have not read those bills. They have not understood the contents. By the time you go through the contents, you will now realize that they're actually pro-poor. You actually find things there that will enable businesses to breed. Today, small businesses are not, part of them are not, many of them are not doing well because of multiplicity of taxes. Part of what the reform is seeking to do is to streamline those, all those multiple taxes. You have over 60 of them. Streamline them so that businesses can, one of the principles of tax is certainty. Okay, you need to know what you have to pay. But if you start up a small business today, a number of agencies will come and be asking you for tax, so you don't even know how much you're paying. That is one of the things tax reform intends to do. Even on the part of workers, on the part of the payee, the payee is also now being designed in such a way that low-income earners, if you're earning less than 1 million naira, for example, in a year, you're no longer going to pay tax. You're exempted. Yes. Okay, it wasn't the situation. In fact, it's not the situation currently. Currently, once you have 300,000 naira, okay, you are taxed at 7%. So first 300,000 is at 7%. The new tax form, the new proposal is saying first 800,000 is zero. So you don't get to be taxed. In fact, the people that are paid 24% currently, once you earn up to 3.2 million, okay, that's the band, the highest band, you pay as much as 24%. Okay, so you can see the new one now is progressive. You don't pay 25% until you earn as much as 50 million, according to the new the proposal. So people should look at these things critically. Companies' income tax in the new tax reform is also being reduced. Today, large companies pay 30% companies' income tax. But in the proposal it says that this tax should come down to 27.5% by 2026, and by 2030 it should drop to 25%. So there's a plan to drop companies' income tax from 30% to 25%. And why is it important? It's important because if you check the neighboring countries, if you check Ghana, all around us, no country is paying as high as 30% companies' income tax. So it doesn't make us competitive. When South Africa companies' income tax is 24, Egypt is around that, Ghana. So they all have lower companies' income tax. So when our own is higher, investments can come in here. So that is one of the things.
And those who are in
yes,
are persuaded to move out to where they can pay less.
Exactly. And for small businesses, again, you also know that a lot of businesses have now been exempted from paying tax. The threshold for small business now has been increased from 25 million. If your turnover is from 25 million to 50 million. So except you have turnover 50 million naira, okay, you won't be, be paying tax. Okay. So when you look at all of that, okay, the totality of the reforms is actually to, improve the business environment, and then also, as I said, reduce the burden of tax, from the poor. And then how would the government maybe get money as a result of all these exemptions? Is because the plan is also to move the burden from the poor, to the rich. Look at the VAT thing too, part of the tax reforms. VAT has exempted, we have exemptions now for basic food items. For food, educational materials, and health. Now all of them are zero rated. Okay? Currently they are exempt, but the new one says they should be zero rated. There's a difference between being exempt and being zero rated. Zero rated is a lot better because zero rated will allow you to recover your input VAT. Under exempt, if you're dealing in all those items that are exempt, you don't get anything input VAT. But under zero rated, meaning no VAT, and yet you can also recover money that you have paid by way of input. Okay, so all these exemptions and the attention to on the poor and small businesses, they will all work together, as I said, to improve the lives of Nigerians. So I think 2025, if the tax reforms are allowed to go through, and I want to make a case and hope that it goes through, those reforms go through, Nigerians will be a lot better, the economy will be a lot better, and on the fear that some states will, lose out as a result of reduced revenue, it doesn't. It's not true. It's not true because if you look at the figures, really, the state, in fact, speaking specifically now with respect to VAT, the state that is even at risk of losing, okay, based on the figures that one I've seen, is even Lagos State. It's Lagos State that gets the bulk of it today because of the headquarter effect. And by the time you begin to apply the attribution, based on consumption now, okay, the 60% derivation, it is Lagos State that will lose. And yet Lagos State is supporting. Why is Lagos State supporting? It's because Lagos State also knows that whatever it will lose as a result of the VAT implementation, it will gain from personal income tax. Because all the rich people, which the personal income tax is targeting, they are in Lagos.
They are in Lagos.
Exactly.
And all the big companies, of course, are also in Lagos.
Exactly.
Right. So, Dr. Adoye, it was just as well that you mentioned the fact that the president, while meeting with the state governors during the Yuletide season, talked about the governors being the link, the major link. He said the most important link to development and prosperity in Nigeria. Now, the tendency most times is for us to concentrate on the federal budget. But we know that states also have budgets. In fact, many states have already presented and had their budgets passed into law. In fact, in some cases, it didn't take the state assemblies 48 hours, less than 48 hours to pass some of those budgets. It didn't have to go through the very rigorous vetting that the National Assembly does with the federal budget. But some of these state budgets, because they do not go through such rigors, appear not to take into consideration the growth and development of those states. And for them, it's just a hollow ritual to go through every year. Just prepare budgets, get it approved by state houses of assembly, and signed into law within hours of being presented and all of that. How do these state budgets key into the national growth plan?
Thank you, Moni, for this very, very important question. In fact, last year we did a political economy analysis of state budgets. It's really horrible. You see, most times we concentrate on the national budget without looking at what is happening at the state levels. I would say without fear of contradiction that what we are experiencing at the state level is not proper physical discipline. Most of the states lack the basic attributes of financial management and accountability. And it is only when the EFCC was set up and the EFCC was trying to, you could see, they were trying to look into the finances of states. The state governments took the EFCC to court until the Supreme Court ruled on the matter. Most of the House of Assemblies in most of the states are just mere institutions that are existing. They do not, like you said, they do not have the necessary power or the necessary will to properly scrutinize, to properly look at the budgets of the states, and also not just that, to carry out proper oversight function on most of the state governors for several reasons. Maybe the way they have emerged, they emerge into the state assemblies, or the overbearing influence or power of the state governments. This issue, this assurance from the president was, why I mentioned it is because most of the opposition to the tax reforms bill, most of the opposition to some of the reforms that the local government autonomy and some of the reforms that Mr. President has embarked on, is being looked at as if it is to water down the influence of the governor. So the president needed to give this assurance that, look, you are not the target of these reforms. What we want to do is to have a holistic synergy between the federal and state government to see how we can all drive development. I think that assurance is very, very important. Like I said earlier, it is not everything you play politics with. If all the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, if we can manage our finances, or if the states can manage their finances, just like the federal government is trying, we believe that there will be a lot of transformation and development. It is sad that in some states, Imoni, it is sad that in some states for good 8 years, you can hardly point at any tangible infrastructural project or development. And when you look at, when we did this analysis, we saw that they will be glorifying setting up of overhead bridge as projects. Yes, it is good. Aesthetics, making the city beautiful is good, but you see, we have fundamental development challenges, issues of healthcare delivery. How many of the state governors or the government officials at the state level can afford to go to even a primary health center in their states? Most times, either they run to Abuja or they run abroad for simple treatment. So you discover that the level of the priorities, the budgetary priorities of most of the state governments, do they need to take a very serious look. Professor Waleke, you budget experts, and also you should take a cursory look at the priorities of most states. We talked about agriculture or food security. The federal government cannot do it alone. If the federal government, for example, buys 2,000 tractors, and every state buys like 1,000, you can imagine the number of tractors that we'll have nationwide. You can't leave everything for the federal government. In states like Benue, the Middle Belt, where bulk of Nigerian food comes from, there is serious instability. We cannot tackle issue of food insecurity in the country without looking at the fundamental causes of why these food shortages are happening. It is basically, you don't need any rocket science. I am from Benue. If you go to the Agatu area, most people have abandoned their farms because of attacks, incessant attacks by so-called herdsmen who are carrying AK-47 all over the bush. So even in states, agricultural rich states like Kebbi and other parts of the northwest and northeast, many farmers have been driven away from their farmland. And that is what is impacting on food security. So we need to take the issue of security in the farm areas. We need to take, we need to look at these things holistically. And you can't do that without the state governments. And that is why one of the issues we have not raised here in this particular forum is the issue of state police. These have been on the front burner of national discourse for quite some time. There's a governor who the commissioner of police or the security apparatus in states do not report to. It weakens them in terms of having a grip of the security of the grassroots. Recently, many states have to establish things like Amotekun, others vigilante services, Hisba, and so on, to fill that void. But it is not good enough. The states need to be empowered to take charge of ungoverned spaces and security of their various states. If we are serious about addressing the issue of food food security in the country. And I think that is why the president make those statements to reassure the governors that, look, it is not that I'm fighting you, but we can all work together to have a synergy together to drive the various reforms that have been put in place. Especially even in the issue of the area of local government autonomy, the state government's cooperation is very, very important. As it is today, the governors see themselves as emperors. In most of the states, you hardly see, you can imagine with all the shout we are shouting about 2024 being a very hard year. If you look at the budget, some governors are constructing government houses, banquet hall, in budget line items. And these are being passed at the state assembly. So we need to do a lot of work in that regard to make sure that development is not looked at from the prism of the federal level alone. We should also look at what is happening in the subnationals, what is happening in the states, what is happening in the local government. How do we synergize all this to be able to move forward? In the past, in the First Republic, when we had regional governments, where the regions were very strong, and this brings me to a very serious debate that we have been having within the political sphere, whether we should adopt parliamentary system or whether we should adopt a presidential system, or how do we cut cost of governance, why do we need to have bilateral legislature or all these arguments. All this is because Nigerians are concerned. We spend so much money, if you look at budget items, so much money on recurrent expenditure, both at the state and federal level.
These are issues that the ones that I just mentioned that will continue to dominate discourse in 2025. And we hope that somewhere along the line we'll be able to resolve them in such a way that they will feed into the agenda of overall development of the nation. But Professor, very quickly, because of the limited time we have left, the president talked about in his New Year message what he referred to as record stock market growth, which he says has generated trillions of naira in wealth.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that growth in the stock market and the trillions of naira it has generated is impacting on the economy generally and on the well-being of Nigerians. And very closely related to that is the statement the president made during the media chat when he says that his government has not been resorting to ways and means to funding and financing government.
Maybe I should even start from that. I think that's one of the positives too, or if you like pluses, that I can say has been recorded. The fact that ways and means, the culture of ways and means, is now becoming a thing of the past. Over time, over the last few years, we accumulated ways and means to up to the tune of 30 trillion. Okay, and you can see the impact that had on the economy, negative impact on inflation. A situation in which, for example, you find GDP growth rate since 2015 has been on the average like 1.8%. But money supply grew over that period of time, grew by as much as 13%, partly on account of the ways and means. So today we are told that the financing of deficits will no longer rely on ways and means. So that's kudos to the central bank, and also, of course, the fiscal authority to not relying on that. So that's one. The issue of stock market performance, that's true. The stock markets ended the year at 37%, more than 37% year-to-date return. So, and that's about the highest you can get. You find in emerging markets, developing markets, including developed markets. Over 37%. I was looking at the one for developed markets. Okay, year-to-date return came in at around 21%. For emerging markets, using Morgan Stanley Capital Index emerging markets, just around 7%. Okay, but Nigeria recording over 37%. So that's remarkable. Now, part of why is not, the impact is not being felt, just as you asked, is because of the size of the market, relative to the economy. The market is still small, and the participants too are not many. You don't have many people participating in that market. That's why number of people are not feeling the impact. Okay, so it's mainly, institutional investors, and of course, even the retail investors are, majorly the high net worth. So that's why the impact is not being felt. Okay, but it's a good thing that yes, we recorded such positive performance, in the stock market. But generally speaking, maybe I should say something again on the budget. Yes, it is true that for many states, they have not been really applying the budget as a tool for proper allocation of resources. That's correct. But we also have outliers, states that are referred to as outliers. A good example is Lagos State. Lagos State is Lagos State's Nasarawa, Kaduna, and perhaps Borno State. Okay, during the time of SAFTAS, the World Bank ran a program called SAFTAS, a State's Fiscal Transparency and Accountability for Sustainability Program. Okay, Kaduna State, for example, and these states I mentioned, remained states that, if you like, recorded pass mark in many of the pillars of SAFTAS. Okay, so I think these few states that appear to be doing well in terms of budget transparency and so on, should be emulated. Okay, that of Lagos State, for example, I also read recently there was this stakeholders engagement, where they try to explain what they have used, the money they have borrowed, from the capital market, the bonds they've issued, where the infrastructure they have applied, apply them. So it's important that when states even borrow, okay, they put them in infrastructure, as opposed to some of the examples, states borrowing and using it to do maybe a guest house. Okay, so the borrowing should be properly applied. Okay, and it's also worrisome that a lot of states too, tend to borrow more from banks, as opposed to you borrow from banks to do projects, as opposed to going to the capital market, to borrow, to do projects. So these are some of the things we should tidy up, particularly at the level of subnationals, and even at the federal level. Okay. Talking about the 2025 budget, you find a budget, the 2025 budget has a deficit of 13 trillion naira. And that 13 trillion naira is going to be financed largely by borrowing. So my advice, I've always suggested that even when we are going to borrow, we should ensure that any money we are borrowing, if we are going to issue bonds, for example, that's long term in the capital markets. If we are borrowing that money, we should put them in projects. We don't have to borrow money to do recurrent, because that will, compound the debt burden that Nigeria, already has. So that would be my advice when it comes to borrowing. The debt service alone in that 2025 budget is 16 trillion. So that gives you an idea of the debt burden that we already have. So if we are going to borrow to finance the deficit, it's important that we tie the money to infrastructure.
To projects.
Yes, to projects.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Adoyi, very quickly, as we round up our discussion, what would be your advice to government at this point in time? Governments at every level, federal, state, local government.
My advice is just very clear. Since we are approaching the 2-year mark, second year mark, they should concentrate on governance. They should. I'm not saying they shouldn't play politics, but they should de-emphasize politics, so that we put a lot of our efforts to try and see how we can develop and transform our economy. It's a very bad way of doing things that 2 years to an election, 3 years to an election, we waste all our time on needless distraction, politicking, when the issues that stare us in the face are there looking at us. So I want to advise all the governments at every level that this 2025, we should please allow politics to be at the sideline and concentrate on economic development. That is one. 2, government should take issue of lives and security very, very prioritize it so that we can solve this issue of food insecurity once and for all. Then thirdly, government, especially at the federal level, should go ahead with the reforms. I agree with Professor Waleke in total that the tax reforms should see the light of day. We should all work and enlighten people on the need to reform that particular sector. I think if all these are put into perspective, I think we'll have a better country going forward.
In 2025.
In 2025.
Thank you so much. Professor Uche Uwaleke is a professor of capital markets at the Nasarawa State University in Nasarawa State, KEFI, of course, and he's the president, Capital Markets Academics of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Adoye Matthew Omale is a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for your time. And once again, Happy New Year. Thank you. We look forward to a better 2025.
Absolutely.
Right? And to you, our viewers out there, we want to thank you for investing your time with us. And we look forward to serving you better in 2025. Bye for now.